Hello and welcome to NewsHour. It's coming to you live from the BBC World Service studios in central London. I'm Tim Franks. We're starting inevitably with the war in the Middle East, but not to head initially at least to Lebanon, hit hard again today by the Israeli military in its campaign against the Iran-backed Hezbollah movement, nor to Iran itself, which also has been struck by the near uncontested might of the Israeli and US Air Force. We will hear from Iran a little bit later, but we're starting instead with a dramatic image from the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow channel of water separating Iran from Gulf Arab countries. The photo is of a Thai cargo ship pouring smoke after being attacked. Attacked, it's presumed, by the Iranians who had warned shipping to steer clear. The news was the headlines in Thailand.
มีเหตุการณ์ไม่คาดฝันเกิดขึ้นนะครับเมื่อมีเรือ3ลำถูกโจมตีที่บริเวณช่องแคบฮอร์มุส
Thai news network broadcasting reports that one of the country's tankers had been struck and was on fire, one of 3 commercial ships in the region to be hit. Just within the last hour or so, President Trump has announced that the US, for its part, has hit 28 Iranian mine-laying ships in the area. The huge reduction in maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has had a major effect on oil and gas prices and supplies. Countries around the world have been reacting to all that means, such as this promise from the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis that his government will impose a cap on profit margins for both fuel and food products.
Obviously, we cannot counter the primary price increases. But we are certainly sending a message that this economic upheaval must not lead to speculative practices that would worsen a problem which is, in any case, already real.
In an attempt to alleviate the immediate shortages, the 32 member states of the International Energy Agency have agreed to release a third of their emergency oil reserve. It's their biggest ever intervention, 400 million barrels. I've been hearing also from Harry Broadman in Washington, D.C. He served as Chief of Staff of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. He's a former U.S. Assistant Trade Representative. He's worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations. How might this blockage in the Strait of Hormuz affect supply chains in all sorts of things?
The all sorts of things is actually really important because I think a lot of people are focusing on just how the oil is not getting through. But as you say, and as we know, it reverberates throughout the entire global economy. So there's a physical issue, right? I mean, is oil getting through? There's a price issue because what does get through is going to be scarce, and the price of oil will go up as it already is. There's a question from a supply chain question of whether the oil will be rerouted and or the goods and merchandise that are being shipped. And then, now there's an incentive right now to build up storage and inventory of oil and frankly, even build up storage and inventory of the goods that otherwise would be transported. And then I guess the other thing that bears mentioning from a price perspective is that you can bet that risk insurance is being purchased by oil buyers, by oil sellers, the shippers, and the like. So this is not a good outcome, both from an inflation perspective, but also from a soft business cycle perspective.
Right. And in terms of the global supply chain, I presume, one of the things that we've known from things like the COVID pandemic of a few years ago is that when there is a snarl up in one place, or when ships can't move for whatever reason in one place, it has huge ripples, doesn't it, all the way through?
Yeah, absolutely. It does have both the physical aspects, which I just mentioned, but then there are the price aspects. And the question is, what kind of inventories have we learned the lesson? Right, from COVID, and have we built just-in-time deliveries and storage, and have we diversified where storage is? That remains to be seen.
Right. Oh, so you're not confident that those lessons necessarily have been learned. In terms of, yes, I suppose people can talk about diversification. People talk about, trying to sort of improve different supply routes and reliance on renewable energy and all the rest of it. But in terms of the sorts of products that are going to be affected, I mean, are we looking at really, everything from plastics to foodstuffs and onwards?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the primary hit is obviously going to be oil and associated products, but their shipping, beyond what they're shipping of oil, obviously is carrying merchandise, and it could have tremendous ripple effects. If you remember during COVID, there were medical issues; medical supplies couldn't get through. So it's not just toys, and cars. It could be actually very serious needed goods and merchandise that could feel the brunt of this.
And presumably that's also partly because these cargo ships, wherever they go, I mean, they also need the fuel that is currently being snarled up.
Absolutely. So there, if you're not in the Gulf of Hormuz, but you're elsewhere, you're paying dear for more diesel and other kinds of fuels that maritime shipping uses. And I'm sure already that has been priced in. And so there's a ripple effect from that, obviously, into the price of goods, and then you have a more generalized aspect of inflation.
The former US Assistant Trade Representative Harry Broadman. Israel says that its latest wave of strikes has targeted Iranian infrastructure and Hezbollah sites in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. In Iran, thousands of supporters of the regime have attended the funerals of some of the military commanders killed in the last 12 days of war. The regime's also issued a threat to any Iranian thinking of going out onto the streets and protesting. John Sudworth has been pulling together a picture of the last 24 hours inside Iran.
After the US Defense Secretary promised the most intense day of bombardments yet, late into the night, cities across Iran were rocked by the sound of explosions. The vast majority of Iranians are suffering this onslaught in enforced silence. To stifle any internal opposition, the government has cut off the internet. But some voices are finding ways to circumvent the censorship, the very few who have access to VPN software or satellite phones. So, what do Iranians make of the war 12 days in? Our colleagues at the BBC's Persian service asked two residents who were both supporters of the anti-government protests that shook Iran earlier this year and were put down with brutal force, how they view things now. First, a woman in her 20s from Tehran. Does she now harbour anger towards those bombing her country, or is it still reserved only for her leaders and the Islamic Republic?
The Islamic Republic. I'll be angry with America and Israel too, but first the Islamic Republic, which dragged the country into a war. I think if Trump stops, people will pour into the streets.
This man, also in his 20s, but from another heavily targeted city, Karaj, is less optimistic about war bringing any kind of positive change.
From the beginning, I never really count on Trump's promises anyway. In my opinion, the future of Iranian people isn't even the smallest of factors in their calculation. I'm not angry at America or Israel at all, even if they end the attacks. Why should it matter to another country? They have always acted for their own benefit. My anger is toward the Islamic Republic. Right now, I feel like US and Israel have to some extent achieved what they want. They just want to make sure their regime can never stand back up again or cause trouble for them. Otherwise, even if they want to change the regime, it wouldn't be for the benefit of the people of Iran.
For now, despite the onslaught, in its outward messaging at least, the government remains defiant, still threatening retaliation against America while warning its own people of harsh consequences for anyone found collaborating with the enemy.
And that was BBC's John Sudworth reporting, and we'll be returning to the war in Iran. We'll be hearing about reports that the supreme leader may have been wounded, and also hearing from the former Iranian men's football team coach in the second half of the programme. And also coming up on this edition of News Hour, we'll be hearing about church organs in Britain. They may be much loved, but they're very much in need of maintenance.
Well, the keys don't go down, you see. They've been disabled.
If you pull out the stops on the left, you get this.
You'll just get a lot of Fs. Yes, I can.
It's not supposed to do that, is it?
No, it's not. No, because I'm not playing any notes. God, dear me. No, I think I shall wake up at about 4 a.m. screaming that note.
More on the church organs that need a bit of care and love in just a few minutes. Our main headline, the price of oil has remained largely unchanged, despite the biggest ever market intervention by the International Energy Agency to counter instability caused by the war in the Middle East. This is NewsHour from the BBC. I'm Tim Franks. We'll be returning to the war in the Middle East later in the programme, but we're going to touch on some other stories now. To begin with, the biggest shift to the right in Chile for decades, indeed since the country returned to democracy in 1990. That shift has come with the inauguration today of José Antonio Cast as president.
Como nuevo presidente de la República, el señor José Antonio Cast Riz.
The sound of the draping of the presidential sash from the ceremony in the National Congress. José Antonio Cast had scored a resounding victory back in December against his leftist opponent and promised a tough approach to crime and illegal immigration. So how is he likely to govern? Nayara Bachke is Chile correspondent for the Associated Press.
Chile nowadays is very different from 4 years ago, when Cast also ran for president and was defeated by outgoing President Gabriel Boric. And last year's election was marked for his support and hardline stance on crime and immigration. And with this speech, Cast got almost 60% of voters in a country that has been hit by a rise in organized crime and also disappointed by the great expectation of Boric's administration. So during the campaign, Cast has praised the crime-fighting tactics of the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, and also some policies adopted by the Trump administration. Among his promises, he has vowed to criminalize illegal immigration, also intensify mass deportations and install fences or walls along Chile's border.
Is he socially conservative as well?
Yes, he is socially conservative, and that was, let's say, the biggest issue 4 years ago. And his discourse and his opposition against the same-sex marriage or the legal abortion, and also some sort of sympathy towards the dictatorship that took place in Chile between 1973 and 1990. So most of Chileans were against that.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because obviously a lot of Chileans weren't around when there was the military dictatorship. They won't have grown up under military dictatorship. And I just wonder if the collective memory of those times is fading. Not to say that he's, about to impose a military dictatorship, but given that he's sort of suggested that it's time for Chile to move on and stop apologising and so forth, is that a stance which you think is gaining ground in the country?
I would say Chile's society is more worried about the current issues and the current problems such as the security crisis and the illegal immigration that has largely shaped the country in the last 4 or 5 years, rather than the social agenda or discussions about the past.
Is he going to have a Congress, a National Assembly who will agree with the direction he's taking the country in?
I've talked to some experts who had pointed out that the first 100 days are going to be key to determine if his main projects can come true or not. Some voters and citizens are impatient and want changes right away. He will have a divided parliament, likely favoring him. So experts have told me that if there is some volume, good negotiation, good communication and traction, normally the political establishment seeks alignment with the government. But then if he faces some opposition or resistance in the Congress, that can also mark the rest of his government.
Nayara Bachke, she is based in Santiago, the capital of Chile, with the Associated Press. A Requiem now to the church pipe organ, at least the traditional church pipe organs of Britain. According to a survey carried out by an organ charity, such things do exist. 5 of these treasures are being thrown away each week. Further, four are falling silent because of a lack of upkeep. If the decline continues at this rate, the charity says that Britain will lose pretty much all of its pipe organs outside cathedrals and concert halls within a few decades. Our arts correspondent David Silito has this report.
We're in Bridgnorth in Shropshire, and dominating the skyline is a huge church, St Leonard's, with a suitably enormous organ, which is a bit troublesome.
In fact, most of that octave's not working.
Stephen Lomas is the organ's custodian, a long-suffering nurse to an ageing and failing friend. One set of keys is silent.
Well, the keys don't go down, you see. They've been disabled.
If you pull out the stops on the left, you get this.
You'll just get a lot of Fs. Yes, I can...
It's not supposed to do that, is it?
No, it's not. No, because I'm not playing any notes. God, dear me. No, I think I shall wake up at about 4 in the morning screaming that note.
This is actually only half an organ. Much of it has already been removed and has now ended up...
Basically went to the tip.
To landfill?
Yes, it's very sad, really.
It is a familiar story, which takes us to a small abandoned chapel near Redditch in Worcestershire, which has become a sort of orphanage or care home for unwanted organs.
That's middle F. They're all a bit like recorders.
The man blowing into the dusty pipe, lying amidst the shelves of organ remains, is George Allen of Pipe Up, who has just completed a survey of the nation's church organs.
We think there are about 15,000 organs in total left in Britain. Only half of those are playable. Only half of them are in regular use. And we're losing them at an extraordinary rate, about 9 a week. We think 5 of them are being sent to rubbish tips every week in Britain.
5 of these are going to landfill every week?
Yes.
So this is an appeal for homes for redundant organs?
You could say so, yes. We know that the rest of the world can't get enough British organs. France, Germany, the Netherlands, Latvia, the Philippines.
The Philippines?
Yes.
The Philippines are taking organs?
Yes, in some numbers. So we hope to lead a sort of crusade to bring back organs to their proper place in the musical life of communities all over Britain.
And there have been successes. 16-year-old Emmanuel here is one of a dozen organ students under the tuition of Fiona Paquette at the East London School of Music.
It's unique. It's like having a whole orchestra in one instrument.
And the Nelson organ is a rescue from a church in County Durham, which has become something of an attraction for the Seventh-day Adventist congregation.
If someone's playing it, it draws attention. People are hearing it from the outside and they just want to come in and see where the sound is coming from.
Britain's organs are facing a dire moment, but there is hope that a bit of care or rescue could stem some of the decline.
Oh, that's a niffy one. Oh, Ebenezer Prout.
And back in Bridgnorth...
That's not a good one.
Play it again.
Stephen's wayward charge is definitely in need of a bit of organ love.
That was a bit iffy, that B, and the G sharp didn't work at all.
You haven't got a G sharp and your B flat.
My B flat knackered, yes.
My B flat is knackered. That report on Britain's neglected church pipe organs, at least some of them are neglected, by our arts correspondent David Silito. You're listening to NewsHour. Welcome back to NewsHour. One of the side effects of the Epstein scandal and the big release of US Justice Department files relating to the late sex offender has been the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer firing the man he had appointed to be ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson. As part of the fallout to that and questions over why Mr. Starmer had made such an apparently risky and controversial appointment in the first place, the British government promised to release documents relating to Lord Mandelson's selection for one of the top diplomatic jobs. The first set of those documents has now been released. Lucy Fisher is Whitehall editor at the Financial Times and host of the FT's Political Fix podcast. What has she learned from what's been released so far?
We've learnt a lot around the process of Peter Mandelson's appointment to this senior diplomatic post, including that Keir Starmer himself was warned about the general reputational risk of appointing Mandelson, given his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. We've learnt that Mandelson, when he left and was sacked from the post last September, asked for a payout of more than £500,000, but received a payout of £75,000, part of which was discretionary, i.e. more than he was contractually obliged to receive. But we should point out that a lot of the documents relating to this whole saga are yet to be released. So in some ways, the revelations today prompt more questions than they answer.
Right. I mean, I know that more documents are due to be released on this, but how far is the government saying, look, you know, we have to be careful here because there is an ongoing police investigation?
Well, look, there is a specific document about the follow-up questions that Downing Street asked Mandelson about his friendship with Epstein that the Metropolitan Police have specifically asked the government to withhold while their investigation is ongoing. Beyond that, there are tens of thousands of documents that the Cabinet Office is reviewing and will send to a separate committee of MPs and peers to look at redactions regarding national security and wider diplomatic considerations, and that committee of parliamentarians will have the final call further down the road on what to redact and what to publish in full.
In terms of the potential damage to the government, and in particular to Sir Keir Starmer in terms of his judgment, there was a lot of fuss at the time. Do you think this is a story that is likely still to have purchase?
I do, and I think that the revelations from the files today add momentum to this scandal that has arrived at Starmer's door. It again highlights that he was warned of the risks. We also see from some of the memos and emails, documents published today, that the UK National Security Advisor, Jonathan Powell, and the senior civil servant at the Foreign Office at the time of the appointment both raised concerns and had hesitations about Mandelson being appointed to that role that they made clear.
And that was Lucy Fisher, Whitehall editor of the Financial Times, host of the FT's Political Fix podcast. You're with the BBC World Service, and this is News Hour, live from London with me, Tim Franks. Back to the war in Iran now, and just within the last few minutes, President Trump has been speaking at a rally in Kentucky. He was typically bullish about how many ships belonging to the Iranian Navy the US has sunk so far.
You know, every hour I have to change because they knock them out so fast. I've never seen anything. Think of it. They knocked out 54 ships in 2 days, and they're real ships. In fact, I got angry at my people. I said, are they any good? Yeah, they're warships. I said, why the hell did we kill them? Why didn't we just capture them and use them in our Navy? They said they wouldn't have qualified for that. But I got a little upset with my people. I said, why do we have to knock them? And actually, one of my generals said, sir, it's a lot more fun doing it this way.
Meanwhile, there's been speculation about the health of the new supreme leader in Iran. Mojtaba Khamenei was only appointed 3 days ago after his father was killed in an airstrike at the start of the war. There were immediately plenty of questions about why he hadn't then appeared, even just produced a video message. Presumably security was one big issue, but now there are reports, apparently backed up by some official Iranian sources, saying that the 56-year-old was injured in the strike which killed his father, his mother, his wife, and a son of his. Shada Hoshmandi is the BBC Persian service reporter based in Washington. What is she hearing about what's being said in Iran about the state of health of the new supreme leader?
Tim, it's really interesting that when it was announced that Mojtaba Khamenei's appointed as Iran's new supreme leader, his supporters chanted, "The hand of God became visible, Khamenei became young again." But this is not what we are seeing now. So he's nowhere to be seen as the young Khamenei and as the young leader. And that's not the image the Islamic Republic wants to depict for us. So based on what Iranian officials told Reuters, Mojtaba Khamenei was lightly injured, but is continuing to operate as leader. However, as you mentioned, we haven't seen any public statement from him whatsoever, and his father's funeral hasn't been held yet. And Iranian state television has described him as a jambaz, or wounded veteran of the war, and that could imply that maybe he's disabled as a result of these injuries, but we don't know for certain what's the extent of these injuries. And we also get additional details from an interview by the Iranian ambassador to Cyprus. The interview was done by The Guardian, and he says Mojtaba Khamenei was present during the attack on his father's residence, Beit, and was injured in the bombardment. And according to him, he suffered injuries to his legs, hands, and arms, and may still be recovering in hospital. And we know that even if he's in the hospital, it's in hiding, and definitely no one knows for security reasons where he is.
So questions, I mean, obviously about his state of health, but also, I guess, questions about who is running the show, who is directing Iran's fight back against this US-Israeli war.
It's most certainly the IRGC, because Mojtaba Khamenei is, he ran his father's office, Beit, for a very long time, but he's also considered to be very close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and he's backed by them. So it's most probably, if Mojtaba Khamenei is in a state that he can still manage certain duties, then it means he probably gives some commands to the IRGC, and he works in close cooperation with them to manage the war. But really, his rise to power is very controversial, and it's not known whether he's going to continue, ruling the country as his father did for many decades.
Right, yes, I suppose, I mean, one of the big mysteries is his state of health now, but also just the sort of supreme leader that he might be, and it's obviously going to be a while before we're going to get any clues as to that.
Yes, that's true, and he's not really known to public. People don't know much about him. Even journalists don't know. So he's always been this man in the shadow. He's known to be behind engineering of the elections in the past few decades, and we really should see his value added is really in being behind the scene and orchestrating things in hiding. And it's really important to see how he's going to act as a supreme leader that needs to be charismatic as well and known to be public.
Just briefly, I mean, it is a bit strange that this news appears to be sort of dribbling out in this way out of Iran. What do you make of that?
In fact, I think it was the Iranian state TV actually mentioned it, that he's been injured, but I think it was the Israeli media that first reported that Mojtaba Khamenei was injured. So it's most probably because they don't want people to think that there is no leadership or the leadership is weakened, because they're pretty much afraid of people protesting against the government and the regime. Okay. And we heard from the Iranian police that they are ready to shoot people down if they come to the streets and chant against the government.
And that was Sheda Hoshmandi, the BBC Persian service reporter in Washington. We've got a fascinating bit of digging to bring you now from our Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford. Back in July 2024, a parcel burst into flames just before it was loaded onto a DHL cargo flight to the United Kingdom. It's one of several incendiary devices sent by post from Lithuania. Now an international investigation has concluded that this was a sabotage attack coordinated by Russian military intelligence against countries allied with Ukraine. 22 suspects have been detained in Lithuania and Poland. In recent months, a wave of such attacks across Europe has been linked to Russia, though Moscow consistently denies involvement. As part of her investigation, Sarah Rainsford has been speaking exclusively to the man who sent the parcels.
This was a sabotage operation run from Russia through messages on Telegram.
Can you meet a man tomorrow? Collect the boxes.
Hi, can do. In person?
Yes, okay. Details soon.
I've had unprecedented access to the texts, and they show that in the summer of 2024, a user called HK was sending instructions to Alexander Shuranovas in Lithuania. He was told to collect 4 parcels in Vilnius and post them to the UK and Poland.
So what's the pay? And what's inside?
They'll give €150. Hold on, I'll send a picture.
What?
That reaction is because the pictures showed tubes of face cream, massage cushions, and sex toys. But concealed inside the parcels, there was a liquid high explosive. These were improvised incendiary devices, and one of them would burst into flames just before being loaded onto a DHL flight to Britain. Any later could have been disastrous. I have now met Alexander Shuranovas. It's the first time any suspect in this case has spoken publicly. I wrote to him in prison as I investigated a wave of sabotage attacks across Europe. And when he was released recently to await trial, he agreed to an interview.
I didn't know what I was part of. I was just sending some parcels, and no more.
Shuranovas is 53. He's tall and talkative, and he maintains he would never knowingly have handled explosives.
I would not have agreed to this, not even for $1 million. Even though we had money problems, I would not have done it. Why would I need $1 million if I'm going to end up in prison for life?
But he did send the parcels. The Joint Investigation Team just released this video, and in it you can clearly see Shuranovas on CCTV posting the 4 boxes. Then there's his arrest, face down on the floor. His story, together with the many case files I've seen, reveals the threat that Russia now poses as it actively recruits within Europe for people to carry out its attacks.
Sometimes you hear people talk about a shadow war by Russia. Do you think that's what we're seeing?
I wouldn't call it shadow. I think it's pretty intense, active confrontation. I think this is active aggression against our nations, and we are in a different ballgame.
Vilmantas Vitkauskas is crisis manager at the Prime Minister's office in Vilnius.
It's quite a clear message that those who support Ukraine, they will be hit by the Russians.
I followed the route that Shuranovas took in July 2024 as he drove to the pickup.
So this is the small park where Alexander Shuranovas sat on a bench and waited for the man who was to hand him the 4 parcels. But he's told me he had no idea that inside those boxes were the devices that this courier had already prepared and had set to go off all over Europe.
The files I've seen show Shuranovas was the last link in a long chain where each person had a task. Set the timers, supply the cars, move the parcels. Many seem to have known only their part and not the full picture. Shuranovas tells me HK, the man who hired him, was an old acquaintance from Russia he'd done business with before. In the chat, he asks,
"There's nothing illegal or banned?"
Shuranovas is Lithuanian, but Russian is his first language. He talks of money troubles and of a criminal record he has for theft and fraud. So I point out he has the exact profile Moscow usually looks for. Shuranovas tells me he'd have to be stupid, though, because he got his wife to drive him to the deliveries, and he used his own debit card. At the DHL office he used then near the airport, A member of staff inspected the parcel Shuranovas had brought in very closely. She even taped up a leaking tube, unaware that it contained an explosive. The next day, that package burst into flames at Leipzig airport. Another went off near Warsaw, a third at a DHL warehouse in Birmingham. Investigators can't be sure whether Russia's ultimate aim was to bring down a plane or to intimidate countries aiding Ukraine. But the capacity to do harm is clear. And I've discovered that the parcel plotters had no plans to stop. Shuranovas told me he'd already been hired to send 3 or 4 parcels a month, and the next delivery was due a few days after he was arrested.
And that was the BBC's Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford with that investigation. You're listening to NewsHour. And a reminder of our top story this hour. The price of oil has remained largely unchanged despite the biggest ever market intervention by the International Energy Agency to counter instability caused by the war in the Middle East. We've been hearing here on NewsHour from Harry Broadman, a former US Assistant Trade Representative, who told us that these major blockages in an important strait used for trade will have broader implications than just access to oil.
The primary hit is obviously going to be oil and associated products, but their shipping, beyond what they're shipping of oil, obviously is carrying merchandise. During COVID, medical supplies couldn't get through. It could be actually very serious needed goods and merchandise that could feel the brunt of this.
This is NewsHour from the BBC, and we're going to end this edition of the programme with the voice of a man who I'm pretty sure is unique, because Afshin Ghotbi has coached both the United States and the Iranian national football teams. He's Tehran-born. He currently lives in the Netherlands. And the reason we wanted to speak to him today was because of the announcement by Iran's Minister of Sports that right now he can't see Iran participating in the Men's World Cup tournament later this year. Their group game fixtures to be played in June in the US, in the country, in other words, that it's currently at war with. What does Afshin make of that news?
Well, it deeply saddens me, and it's a very personal matter for me because football has been my life. And for 90 plus million Iranians, football is probably as close to religion as it can get. It's their passion that they are born with, they live with. And the Iranian national team historically has been basically one of the greatest joys of Iranian people. And having the World Cup come to United States and Mexico and Canada, and with so many Iranians that live in America, especially in Los Angeles, and it would have been a great opportunity for the Iranian players and Iran as a country be celebrated the World Cup in front of so many people that have been so far from their country.
Yeah, and Iran has qualified for the World Cup finals. I think actually the last 3 World Cup finals, maybe.
Yeah, this one makes the 4th one in a row.
In a row, yeah. And we're in unprecedented times. I mean, I can't think of a World Cup which has been staged when one of the host countries is at war with one of the other countries which has qualified for the World Cup. So lots of people say sport and politics shouldn't mix. It would be difficult to see the Iranian team play in the States, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe there's another way to look at it. Imagine if FIFA finds a very creative way to allow a selection of Iranian players, which many play abroad, and have a neutral organization manage it and allow those players who earn their right to be in the World Cup, who is basically their life dream to be in the World Cup. And how many World Cup does any player ever get a chance to play in their lifetime? So maybe it's a great moment for FIFA to highlight what they stand for, that the sports are always above politics. And I believe that maybe there are creative ways that this can be done. And I hope that FIFA explores that.
I mean, you're in a unique position in that you have coached at the highest levels both the US national team and the Iranian national team. Can you just give me a sense of what it was like for you to cut across such different sporting cultures and national cultures as well?
Well, I've been very fortunate in my life to commit myself to my passion and to be able to take it to literally to the highest level. And I've worked across 8 countries, and wherever I've been, I've faced enormous amount of, for lack of better words, racism, prejudice. Basically, I have stories such as I'm playing a derby in Japan in the J League, one of the most polite countries you could possibly be in, and an Iwata fan puts a massive banner, and they have a sign saying "Gobi, stop making bombs." And when you experience that kind of
Racism,
judgment,
as you say, I mean,
yeah,
it is
yeah.
racist.
And so when you see that across the world, you try to use your position with love and with understanding and patience to teach people that we're all the same, and it doesn't matter where we come from. We deserve respect and dignity, and we should be allowed to have hope and purpose in our lives. And I've tried to live by that, and I've go to jobs. I had a job interview in Germany, and with a top club. I don't want to name the club, and I was applying for the head coaching job, and the president of the club basically looks at me and says, "You'll be the perfect manager for my team, but it's impossible for me to hire you." So when
And
when
did
you
he explain
experience,
why?
of course, he didn't go further, and I understood the reason and the
Well, what
way
did you
you would
say to
understand.
that? Can I ask?
Disappointed. I was disappointed because I think only Iranians can understand that, because most Iranians in the last 47 years that have lived abroad, or even Iranians within Iran that have experienced life trying to achieve their dreams and go for their goals, they've had massive speed bumps and mountains of obstacles in front of them. And I'm proud to say many Iranians around the world have been very successful because of just their grit and their never given up spirit. And so that makes me proud. At the same time, it makes me sad. And with this World Cup, I thought it was a great opportunity for all the Iranians around the world to come as one and celebrate the sport of football at the greatest event in the world.
May I ask, I mean, and I don't know if you still have family in country, but just what your thoughts are about the events of the last couple of weeks, about this war that is obviously consuming your country, but it is affecting so many people around the world. Can you tell me if you have reflections on what's going on right now?
I think personally, and I speak for probably many people around the world with different citizenship, I think most people are against war. Very few wars or any wars have ever solved human conflict problems. And I'm not sure if this war will solve the problems of the Iranian people or even the geopolitical problems that we're facing. Obviously, bombarding a country or bombarding the people of a country doesn't help anyone. At the same time, I think my hearts go to the people of Iran because for 47 years, many of them have been pursuing freedom and hope and trying to live their lives and be part of the global community. And I think due to various political decisions that the government of Iran has taken, it's been very difficult for them to be part of the international community. And so how do you solve this? How do you integrate the Iranian people to the global community and allow them to live lives as most people around the world are living? And I'm hoping that day is near us. And if anything positive can come from that war, may be a possibility for the Iranian people to join the rest of the world.
Afshin Ghotbi, he's coached both the US and the Iranian national football teams. And he brings this edition of NewsHour to a close. From me, Tim Franks, and the team here in London, thanks for your company.